a WikiVidi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Serial Podcast. Serial is an investigative journalism podcast hosted by Sarah Koenig, narrating a non-fiction story over multiple episodes. The series was co-created and is co-produced by Koenig and Julie Snyder and developed by This American Life. Episodes vary in length. New episodes were originally available weekly, but partway through the second season the schedule was revised to every other week. Serial ranked number 1 on iTunes even before its debut and remained there for several weeks. Serial won a Peabody Award in April 2015 for its innovative telling of a long-form non-fiction story. As of the 10th of June 2017, the podcast's episodes were downloaded a total of 175 million times, establishing an ongoing world record. The last episode of Season 2 of Serial was released March 31, 2016. The producers of Serial launched the podcast's town on March 28, 2017. Season 3's release date is planned to be sometime in early 2018. The series is being adapted for television by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. Series overview. Koenig has said that Serial is about the basics: love and death and justice and truth. All these big things. She also has noted, "This is not an original idea. Maybe in podcast form it is, and trying to do it as a documentary story is really hard. But trying to do it as a serial, this is as old as Dickens." New York Magazine reported that Phil Lord and Chris Miller, directors of the Lego Movie and the film 21 Jump Street, would be producing a television program about the podcast that will take a behind-the-scenes approach that details how Koenig went from virtual anonymity to creating one of 2014's biggest cultural phenomenons. Season 1, 2014. Season 1 investigated the 1999 murder of Hae-Min Lee, an 18-year-old student at Woodlawn High School in Baltimore, Maryland, U.S. She was last seen at about 3 p.m. on January 13, 1999. Her corpse was discovered on February 9 in Leakin Park and identified 2 days later. The case was immediately treated as a homicide. Lee's ex-boyfriend, Adnan Masood Syed, was arrested on February 28 at 6 a.m. and charged with first-degree murder, which led to some closure and some peace for Lee's family. A memorial service for Lee was held on March 11 at Woodlawn High School. Syed's first trial ended in a mistrial, but after a 6-week second trial, Syed was found guilty of Lee's murder on February 25, 2000, and given a life sentence. Despite pleading his innocence, Syed did not speak in front of the jury. In February 2015, 3 weeks after the end of Season 1, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals filed a decision allowing Syed to appeal his conviction on grounds his attorney, Christina Gutierrez, had provided ineffective counsel for failing to seek a plea bargain during his trial. The court also announced that another 3-judge panel would address the question of whether new evidence from Asia McClain, providing an alibi for Syed, would be admitted. On June 30, 2016, Judge Martin P. Welch granted Syed's motion for post-conviction relief, setting aside the original conviction and calling for a new trial, agreeing that it demonstrated ineffective assistance of counsel that Syed's lawyers did not question the interpretation of cell phone tower evidence during the original trial. On February 9, 2015, Scott Pelley of CBS News reported Serial Season 1 episodes had been downloaded more than 68 million times. By February 2016, the episodes had been downloaded over 80 million times. Season 2, 2015-16. In September 2015, the New York Times reported the second season would focus on Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, an American Army soldier who was held for 5 years by the Taliban, and then charged with desertion. A spokesperson for Serial only said, "Over the last few months they've been reporting on a variety of stories for both Seasons 2 and 3 of Serial, along with other podcast projects." The first episode of the season was released, without any previous release date announcement, on December 10, 2015. For Season 2, Koenig teamed up with Mark Bull, the Academy Award-winning screenwriter of The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, and his production company, Page 1. Boll had conducted a series of interviews with Bergdahl as part of a film production he was working on, and both Boll and Bergdahl gave Koenig permission to use those excerpts of those recorded interviews in episodes of Serial. As Koenig stated in Season 2's first episode, they'd come to us saying, "Hey, we've been doing all this reporting on the story, and we've also got this tape. Do you think you might want to listen?" And yes, we did, and we were kind of blown away, and so we began working with them. They shared their research with us, and also put us in touch with many of their sources. We don't have anything to do with their movie, but Mark and Page 1 are our partners for Season 2. On December 14, General Robert B. Abrams, head of United States Army Forces Command at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, ordered that Bergdahl face a court-martial on charges of desertion. Sarah Koenig announced on January 12, 2016, that the podcast's schedule would be changed to every other week to allow for deeper reporting, and to add more information than initially planned, with Season 2 Episode 5 released on January 21, 2016. Internet radio service Pandora Radio streamed the second season of Serial. On November 3, 2017, military judge Colonel Jeffrey R. Nance rendered a verdict dishonorably discharging Bergdahl from the Army, reducing his rank to private, requiring forfeit of some of his pay for 10 months and no prison time. The verdict is subject to review by General Robert B. Abrams, and may also be appealed to the United States Army Court of Criminal Appeals. After the sentencing, Serial announced to be working on a coda for the season award. In June 2017, the Radio Television Digital News Association announced Season 2 of Serial has won the 2017 National Edward R. Murrow Award for a news series and for its website. Murrow Awards are presented in October in New York. Development and release. The concept for Serial originated with an experiment in Koenig's basement. Koenig and Snyder had pitched a different idea at a staff meeting for a weekly program on events during the previous 7 days, which staff members received without enthusiasm. When Ira Glass asked Koenig if she had any other ideas, she mentioned podcasting a story that unfolded over time, a serialized narrative. In an interview with Mother Jones, she explained that each episode would return to the same story, telling the next chapter of a long, true narrative. Episode 1 of the series was released on October 3, 2014, with additional episodes released weekly online. Glass introduced it as a spin-off of his popular radio program, This American Life, and aired Episode 1 on his show. He explained, "We want to give you the same experience you get from a great HBO or Netflix series, where you get caught up with the characters, and the thing unfolds week after week, but with a true story, and no pictures. Like House of Cards, but you can enjoy it while you're driving." Music. Nicholas Thorburn released the soundtrack for Serial on October 17, 2014. It includes 15 tracks, all short instrumentals, and is available at the Bandcamp site or streamed from several reviewing sites. Mark Henry Phillips, who mixes the show, has also provided original scores. Musical credits for Season 2 include Thorburn and Phillips, as well as Fritz Myers and staff music editor Kate Belinsky. Funding. Serial's launch was sponsored by MailChimp, a frequent podcast advertiser, and salaried staff positions were initially funded by Bez. Admitting the podcast was funded from This American Life's budget during the launch, producer Koenig noted that Serial would eventually need to generate its own funding. She said, "Everyone's saying it's podcasting. It's internet. Of course there'll be money somewhere. We're not exactly sure yet." Dana Chivies, another producer, observed that, since the industry is still in its infancy, a business model for podcasting has yet to be established. Towards the end of the first season, producers asked for public donations to fund a second season. Within a week, the staff of Serial posted an announcement that a second season has been made possible by donations and sponsorship. Season 1, 2014. The first season of Serial was both culturally popular and critically well received. Serial was ranked at number 1 on iTunes even before it debuted, leading iTunes rankings for over 3 months. Well after the first season ended, It also broke records as the fastest podcast ever to reach 5 million downloads at Apple's iTunes Store. David Carr in the New York Times called Serial podcasting's first breakout hit. The Guardian characterized it as a new genre of audio storytelling. Introducing a PBS NewsHour segment about Serial, Judy Woodruff noted that it is an unexpected phenomenon, and Hari Srinivasan mentioned it as 5 million downloads on iTunes, far more than any other podcast in history. Calling the characters rich and intriguing, the Daily Californian noted similarities to the film The Thin Blue Line, and described the podcast as gripping, and the story as thrilling, while applauding the series for giving listeners a unique opportunity to humanize the players. Slate's reviewer pointed out that Serial is not escapist and went on to note, someone in the show is not telling the truth about something very sinister. That's the narrative tension that makes Serial not only compelling, but also unlike anything I can remember watching or reading before. The Baltimore Sun commented on the inherently riveting subject matter, and noted that the top-notch reporting and podcast format yield a novel twist on the investigative long-form piece. A critique from the journalism community was more qualified, first noting that some people believe there is a podcast renaissance. The reviewer from Harvard's Nieman Journalism Lab observed that even though podcasts are not new, they are not yet mainstream. Not all critiques of the podcasting format have been as equivocal. Pop Matters observed that podcasting is a new distribution model, very different from television as a distribution model, because it gives users access to media and the freedom to listen to episodes of a long-form story while doing other things. The reviewer applauded the focus on long-form journalism and added, "Suddenly you feel like the full promise of podcasting has just been unleashed. That long-form narrative nonfiction is really the way to best leverage the potential of podcasting as a distribution model." A Wall Street Journal critic observed, "Podcasts have slipped marketers' minds. Zenith Optimedia, for example, put out a forecast predicting 0% growth for the medium after years of positive momentum." Discussing the economics of podcast advertising, New York Magazine noted that the personal nature of the podcast format allows higher advertising rates. CPM was between $20 and $45. Compare that to a typical radio CPM or network TV or even a regular old web ad, and the podcast wins. Multiple reviews have commented on the addictive nature of Serial. A review in New York Magazine linked fans' feelings about the possibility of an ambiguous ending with their psychological need for closure. Reddit hosts a Serial subreddit site. Slate is also following the story closely, and presents a podcast discussion of Serial every week following the latest release. Several reviews have criticized the ethics of Serial, notably the decision to start broadcasting without the reporting having been finished. Critics said the live investigation format invited listeners to do their own sleuthing, which quickly led to exposure online of the full names and even addresses of people who were questioned by the police. Another point of debate was whether it was legitimate to use the murder of Hae-Min Lee as a subject for entertainment. Sarah Koenig's reporting has also been criticized as being biased in favor of Adnan's innocence, and Katie Waldman's Slate blog noted that some felt Serial undercut Adnan's detractors. An Atlantic Roundtable discussion noted that the podcast forces the listener to consider Koenig's verification bias, the tendency to seek answers that support her own biased assumptions, and that even a well-meaning narrator isn't always credible. One critic asserted that Koenig presented the story of a murder involving two minority teenagers and their cultures through a lens of white privilege, a white interpreter stomping through communities that she does not understand. A rejoinder in The Atlantic pointed out, Serial is a reflection on a murder case and the criminal justice system reported over just a year, which is to say, it is researched with more effort and depth than 99% of journalism produced on any beat in America. Most of all, the response to mistakes should never be to discourage white reporters from telling important stories. Serial was honored with a Peabody Award in April 2015, noting, Serial rocketed podcasting into the cultural mainstream, and that it was an experiment in long-form, non-fiction audio storytelling. It was cited for its innovations of form and its compelling, thrilling account of how guilt, truth, and reality are decided. Dr. Jeffrey P. Jones, director of the Peabody Awards, commented the podcast showed how new avenues and approaches to storytelling can have a major impact on how we understand truth, reality, and events. In an interview with John Ronson for The Guardian, Syed's mother Shamim and younger brother Yusuf both said they listened to the podcast and that people sent transcripts to Syed in prison. Yusuf said the podcast had indirectly reconnected the family to his estranged brother Tanveer for the first time in the 15 years since the murder. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like